let's try and put it all together then and talk about this extraordinarily important question that people have debated for a long time of when China might become the biggest economy in the world, measured just in pure dollars at market exchange rates. Simon, we had a cover on this a few years ago about peak China, and there was an extraordinary chart in this showing the various projections that have been made and how the debate has shifted. Do you want to talk us through that?
Sure, yeah. So on the horizontal axis, you have years, beginning at the start of this century and stretching right out to 2070. And then importantly, on the vertical axis, what you're seeing are percentages. That's China's GDP as a percent of US GDP. So it's a comparison of China's GDP relative to America's. So when it gets to 100, it's level with America. So these are forecasts of where China will be relative to America made at different times in the past. Not only has the date at which China might overtake shifted, but also the trajectory, if you like, of China after that point. So we used to assume that China would overtake at some point and then the lead would continue growing. That view has changed. And a few years ago, Goldman Sachs updated their projections and had China overtaking a bit later and then plateauing. So the two were running roughly neck and neck for quite a few years out to 2070. Even more recently, the OECD now thinks that perhaps it'll never overtake at all. And you see this peak where it gets right level with America and then starts actually losing ground. And I think that gives sort of economic meaning to this catchy phrase, peak China. It's not that China's GDP will shrink, it's that China's GDP relative to America will get close and then fall slowly away, partly because of the demographic issues we've just been discussing.
So we asked people in the newsletter whether they thought China would ever become the world's biggest economy. And here is the verdict. We can see that a big majority, 74% of viewers, think that China will eventually overtake the US, with a plurality saying it will happen in the 2030s. Only 26% of people agree with that OECD line from Simon's chart showing that China might never catch up with the US. Mike, let's start with you. Do you think China will ever overtake the US for economic size?
I think as it stands, I'm with the 26% here. I'm in the never camp. I think that's not because I think the Chinese economy does have some sort of life left in it yet. I think it's still very low income relative to where it could be. I think the demographic issue is really, really going to bite. One thing I would say here is I'm partly less interested in the Chinese side, where I think the misallocation and the demographics are a big problem. This seems to me more like it's the US is to lose. If the US loses its dynamism through various political constraints, if it turns to become very anti-immigration, its population growth slows considerably, I can see the US losing its own lead more than I can see China sort of accelerating to supersede the US if the US doesn't get things wrong in that way.
I'm in the never camp as well, I think. I think that's partly, it's a policy choice really for the government. And we've seen in recent years, they have de-emphasized GDP growth targets. They're trying to emphasize what they call high quality growth, which is ultimately growth which is not intended to generate optimal economic activity, but to do other things to make the country powerful, strong, etc. And so for as long as that kind of policy holds, I think it has some runway yet, that's unlikely to overtake America.
So I still think that China will overtake America, but America might subsequently re-overtake China. That's not a view that's original to me. I think it was first set out by Capital Economics, a research firm, and they said this is the ideal outcome because everyone gets to be right.
Excellent. Well, I don't think I can beat that for fun. I think I'm probably in the never camp, although it seems to me that so much here depends on the AI race that, it's entirely possible to imagine China overtaking the US if somehow it managed to get ahead in AI. So that's where I stand. But I like that even once it's overtaken, that's not the end of the matter.